Welcome to San Diego Integral, September 9th, 2023. Our topic today, the paradox and ethics of perspective taking, presented by Geoff Fitch.
Welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Tom Habib, and I'm a member of the leadership team. We have an exciting presentation today. Geoff Fitch from Pacific Integral is with us, and as you know, he's going to be speaking on paradox and the ethics of perspective taking. And introducing him today is going to be our own Jerry Golick.
Hey, thank you, Tom. So our presenter today is Geoff Fitch, and Geoff is a coach, a trainer, facilitator of growth in individuals and organizations. Geoff has been exploring, researching, and developing diverse approaches to cultivating higher human potentials for over 25 years. And he's one of the founders of Pacific Integral, where he has, among many other things, led the Generating Transformative Change program, which is called GTC, for over 20 years. And I know we have at least one other GTC grad here today. I see Kabir is here, has been through the program. Was there anybody else, any other GTC grads on today? I've had the privilege of being a member of two GTC cohorts in 2017 and 2020, where I was able to kind of benefit from Geoff's facilitation and leadership in many different ways. And one of them I would say would be the more technical side of Geoff, which is his writings and the academic writings, his models of growth and human development. But also there's just a very practice-based and embodied experience of actually living the experience of transformative change and growth that Geoff facilitates. And one of the things I really appreciate about him is that he always surprises me. And I kind of take this as an indication that he continues to explore and innovate. And maybe related to that is that even though Geoff leads the program, he also participates in it. So he's always exploring his own evolution and the evolution of collective intelligence. And, in this work, in my opinion, it really contributes to the, kind of populating the globe with really new generations of like heart-centered leaders and innovators. So I really appreciate Geoff's work in the world. And so, as usual, I'm really looking forward to what Geoff has to offer today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Geoff.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much for those kind words. And hello, everybody. Hi, Suzanne. Nice to see you. Nice to see some friendly faces. Kabir, a lot of you I don't know, so it's just lovely to meet you and be here with you and to spend this time together. I think that we're going to be exploring something, and exploring something is not the same as me presenting. Exploring is kind of like getting down on your hands and knees and wandering around in the dark together and kind of circling something and approaching it from different places and finding out how that's changed you. And so I hope that we do that together. I have basically we'll spend some time kind of offering some sort of invocations or provocations or a few words to kind of orient us in a direction, and we'll move into kind of an inquiry around that, and then we'll get back down on our hands and knees and fumble around in the dark and look at it from a different perspective. So it's an exploration. So I just invite you to be in it with me and with us and learn together. So that's my invitation. And I have some slides that I'm going to be using to guide some parts of it. And so I find that when I go in and out of slide presentation mode, with the way Zoom works, I get a little bit not so present to what's happening with us, because you kind of disappear into the background. So it might be helpful if you have questions or comments I might miss them if they go in the chat, or maybe Eloy or Jerry can flag something if there's something important that comes up in the chat. But if we can stay together in the room like we're all together here, And if you have something, raise your hand or bring it forth and we can talk about it. And yeah, just see if there's anything else. Maybe take a moment just to kind of land together. So we've heard all of these kind of invitations and logistical things, but maybe just take a moment and breathe together and sit in some stillness. A good time also to drop into your body or emotional self or into any part of yourself that you might have lost track of, but kind of more fully arrived. And as we begin, I would just invite you to tune in to your own sense of what drew you to this place right now, to take some time out of your life to be in this exploration. There's a curiosity or something about this topic or what you imagine the topic to be that drew you here, just to tune into that so you can bring your intentionality into the conversation. What do you care about? Why does this matter to you? We're just bringing ourselves fully here. We could also call this session how to be nicer to yourselves and other people. But I made up a more highfalutin title for it. And I say that because as I tune into what matters to me about this, it's that we have greater understanding for each other and greater kindness and relate to each other in a way that is a greater expression of our selves, of our potential as people. So I want to dive into the topic a little bit and bring perspective taking into that, because ultimately how we bridge from what matters and how we care for each other ultimately, and so maybe later in the conversation this will come back in, is how we see the world matters. It has an impact on the world that we create together. So this isn't an abstract topic. It's like everything in a way that's come about so far in our history is a result of our perspective taking, you could say. And so it really matters. And so that's the connection I would make. So I'm going to share a slide right now and say a few things, then we'll have just kind of a little conversation about this. Here we go. Okay. See that okay? I gotta make it big. All right, so I can see the slides, but I can't see you. So Jerry or Eloy, you let me know if I need something that's going on that needs my attention. I'm just going to share a few reflections here to start us off. So I want to explore a kind of a polarity that's embedded in this topic as a way to start off and explore the movement of immersion and surfacing. But first, you all, I'm sure, have heard this statement. It's part of our cultural milieu now, but the Tao that can be named, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. So this points to something just to carry with us in our exploration as a beginning point, as a ground, that this speaks to the ultimate or the absolute or the implicate order or the ground of being, or the true nature of things that's beyond our ability to speak of them. And naming, in a sense, is another way of saying perspective taking. So it's to say, once we name the ultimate, it's not the ultimate. There's a trick here because it's named the eternal Tao. So that's what we do, right? We reduce this vast, unlimited, infinite, eternal, timeless, spaceless phenomena, and we start to take it apart. But let's start with the eternal Tao as something to bring to our mind. And this is, in a way, what I'm reading here as I'm talking about this, but these words are poetry. So you could listen to them like it's poetry and feel this as much as you think about it. Here's a more complex way of saying it. This is from Dai. He says the human individual in the midst of reality is like a camera in the room, perceiving everything from a fixed point of view. But what does the room really look like? The room can be viewed from every possible point of view in space-time, not merely from any particular point of view, or even a finite collection of points of view. Therefore, no point of view can reveal the room or reality itself, because every point of view is limited and essentially self-referring. So again, this is kind of, I could say this is kind of a pointing to the eternal Tao, that and it's also, teasing us out of a little bit of surfacing us out of our perspective taking, that we move through life as if we're moving through the world, as if we're in the room, but we're really in our perspective of it. It's a little bit of a challenge to that. Later on in the Tao Te Ching, there's these words: the Tao gives birth to the one gives birth to the two, and the two give birth to the three, and the three gives birth to the 10,000 things. Such a beautiful, beautiful statement. So this points to something, we can use this to inspire our thinking about perspective taking, that there's a kind of architecture to it. This is talking about polarities, you could say. The Tao gives birth to the manifest reality, which has a oneness to it, which has a wholeness to it. And this wholeness gives birth to the two, to yin, yang, light, dark, integral world. We think about polarities all of the time. We know that there's at least 10,000 of them. But this is a kind of architecture, you could say, like this gives birth to the one and the other, and then this two gives birth to the three, which is, there's a kind of wholeness or a movement or a dynamism within the two that is the wholeness itself. Or you could say there's unity, duality, and non-duality. And then this moves on to create all of the universe. So as we kind of bring our awareness to perspective taking, we can see kind of the vastness of how this is occurring. So I just have this question. I'm going to pop out of the screen sharing for a moment and ask this question. If someone asked you, like, what are your beliefs? Just take a moment and reflect on that. What are your beliefs? Like, as if I'm really asking you that. Yeah. So now notice where your attention went when I asked you that question. Where did you look to find them in what you believe? often when if somebody asks me that question, if I ask someone else that question, or maybe I kind of soften my gaze, I might turn away, might bring my attention inward. What are my beliefs? Like they're in here, and now imagine if you look out at the world, like the room you're in or the sky outside, that's what you believe. This is not in here, it's out here. So it's the help, it's just a provocation to consider that we are immersed in an experience of our perspectives all of the time. Most of the time we're just living in a world that we're conceiving of together and individually. And it's not bad to, just to fall asleep to that. It's good, but it's also good to wake up from it. So we'll have a little inquiry now. So this is about surfacing immersion in a perspective and surfacing from it. Just bring back the slides. You see the slide there? Okay. Oh, this is anybody seen the movie I Heart Huckabees? So if you haven't seen this movie, it's a hilarious and beautiful and touching and philosophical movie. And there's this thing that they do in it, which is a high level integral practice, which is they hit each other in the face with a balloon, and that wakes them up from their immersion in the dream. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a little film of this.
Did you get it? Yeah. I did, I felt it. It's hard to describe.
So there's a moment like when life hits you, right? And you're like, oh my God, you see something that you haven't seen before. This is what I want to inquire a little bit about this. We'll come back to that film clip a little bit later. So think of a time when you had this, like an aha, about something in life, something you thought was, this is just how things are. And it turned out like, oh my God, this is like a perspective I've been holding, or an assumption I've been holding, or a view, or like it was something that was just happening in my mind or my experience, and you stepped out of it and you saw like, oh, that isn't just reality. It's like something in me. It's this Keegan's subject to object shift. It can be anything. It can be like we're all kind of interested in our own personal growth and exploration. If you explore your own psychology, there's all sorts of moments of this. I grew up in my family with this story, this kind of subtle, not really explicit story, but this subtle story that one of my parents was the bad one and one was the good one. And it wasn't until much later in life that I thought, what? Maybe that was a story. It wasn't just real. So take a moment and think about something like this. That's, the more meaningful, the better. When you had this kind of moment of something coming out of your immersion into witnessing it. Everybody got something? Now take a moment and reflect on what was that experience like, to surface from an experience of something that you thought was true and realized it was a perspective you were holding. What did it feel like before it happened? What did it feel like during when it happened? And what did it feel like after it happened? Anybody lost? They'll be following this? Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So we're just going to take a few minutes in breakouts and pairs and just to reflect on this inquiry. Like, what is it like to be immersed in what later becomes apparently a perspective or a story about your life that you were in until that point? So, Eloy, you can go ahead and open up the breakout groups.
Okay, we're doing this for 8 minutes.
Yeah, this is for 8 minutes. So you can have a conversation, take 4 minutes each, however you'd like to proceed.
Breakout sessions are not recorded.
Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, so just love to hear a little bit from a few of you, just what that inquiry opened up and what you're noticing, who we are in this moment. Yeah, any reflections from that?
Yeah. What I noticed is we both talked about an acid trip when we were 19, and it changed our lives, and it dictated the course of the rest of our lives. So,
wow. You both happen to be 19?
Yep.
Same acid trip. Back then they knew how to make it right, you know.
So what, Jesse, what changed for you in that? Like what if you go back to before the world you were living in before that happened, and how did you see the world that you were living in before that happened, after it happened? Like, what changed for you?
It was way bigger. It was kind of it was kind of like I saw that it was that my perception had a lot more impact, like that my perception of reality didn't determine everything, but it probably determined like 90% of what was going on.
Yeah.
Was about my perception, and then it just made life really bigger.
Yeah.
And me more powerful in a funny way. I was not important in an ego way, but I was more powerful in a big way.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to just hear from a couple more. I love that. Thank you. So what was that? What did this provoke? What opened up for you? What did you notice?
On the same acid trip theme, because that's who I was talking to. I was walking through a bar in Gainesville, Florida on a Saturday night, and I noticed everybody seemed to have like a physical mask facade in front of them, about 3 inches away from their face.
Huh.
It's the first time in my life I ever noticed that people weren't what they seemed and pretended to be something other than they were.
Wow.
And because of complex PTSD and all kinds of other non-important factors right now, I didn't know that, and that rocked my world. And I had to wait till the drug wore off and check it out in reality, and I go, holy crap, everything I know is wrong. I took people at face value, and now I realize everyone's pretending to be something they're not. And I didn't know this. I didn't know this in middle school or high school, which accounted for a lot of, what was happening to me socially, right? So that was a revelation. And, almost coincidental with that, there was someone that walked into my life that had the most gifted ability for empathy of anyone I've ever known since. And she was the first person where I actually had the experience of being seen, because I didn't ever have that. And suddenly I looked around and I saw, where did all these people come from? And that all happened in that year, and totally changed the direction of my life, because I realized, but it really started from my reality being completely shattered. So it's a pretty extreme example of perspective there, right? It was like, perspective is really, I don't know anything. And it was very scary, but also gave me a reason to live.
Hmm.
So, you know,
If I'm interested in when you said scary, I mean, looking back on it now, you don't look afraid. So there was a point where that kind of moved through you and you began to see the world from a different place and it wasn't so disturbing, or is that not true?
it took a long time, but the source
Uh-huh.
of the fear was really tangential. The source of the fear turned out to be having been gaslighted as a child all the time. And
Yeah.
so people effing with your reality made it mean I felt very insecure and unmoored. And now, you know, now that I've made some progress and peace with the gaslighting, it's, you know, no longer something I'm scared of. So
Yeah.
it was more that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful example, Michael. Thank you for sharing it, you know, so eloquently. That movement that you went through. It's a like significant. You know, we can surface out of perspectives. You know, like we all have kind of looked for a book on our house, and then realized that the lost search was because we had some assumption about the color of the book and we were looking for a green book. And you know, that's not a terribly life-changing perspective, but the ones that, you know, you're talking about are really deep and foundational in how we see the world, like that there's something beneath the surface of people that we're not seeing when we see what's on the surface, and that opens up a whole richness, and then you experience someone else seeing your richness and feeling you're empathetic with you. This is a really significant shift. And
absolutely. But first you go through the experience of being very lost.
right, it's disorienting. It's
Yeah.
disorienting. What I shared with Kabir, you know, an experience I had similar to that, and where I had a kind of it was me seeing, like, 25 years ago, like studying the Enneagram and finding myself in one of the Enneatypes. And it was really just surfacing this foundational experience that I had in life that was just happening all of the time. And I just thought this experience that I was happening in life was a natural consequence of what was going on around me. Of course, anybody would react to the situation like that. And then I saw this pattern in myself as a kind of not a natural consequence of what was happening, but something that was habitual in me, and it was disorienting. I was like dissociated for a few days, going like, is what's real and what's not real? And then I landed somewhere new. So that kind of surfacing can be challenging, which is, we'll make a mental note of that when we come back to talking about the ethics of this and what matters about it and how to be caring in this context. Because you can but feel now that just for the moment, the movement through our perspectives is you know, is fraught with meaning and sometimes risk for us. So just take a note of that. I'd like to share something else. It's okay, and then we'll have more conversation. Since you brought it up, it's a good transition to something that, since you brought up, Michael, the empathy. I want to come back to the slides. So this is just a little review of where we've been, which is, you know, a kind of term that we sometimes use as having a perspective or being had by it. So we're really talking about being immersed in an experience and a perspective and surfacing from it and then witnessing it and having something new arise. So we're exploring perspective from the inside of this kind of movement. So the inquiry has been like, what's it been like to be immersed in a perspective and surface out of it? What's that feel like? What's that experience? How does that impact you? In a way, you can say it's moving from being taken by a perspective to taking a perspective. A lot of times we just live being taken by the perspectives that we have. We don't even know that we're having them. So I want to point to another part of this movement, which is that you can move from taking a perspective to giving yourself to a perspective. So if I were to add a couple of more words here, you can be immersed in a perspective, surface from it, see it, and then you can also give yourself to a perspective, to embody it. And this really comes, Michael, into this dimension of empathy. So what's happening when we actually feel empathy for another? Someone who's different from us. We come to witness the difference. And if we don't move beyond that, we just sort of keep them at a distance and say, well, okay, that's, I'm a Democrat, they're a Republican. I see that, I witness that. But if I actually come into a relationship to their perspective, or it could be a new perspective in myself, and actually give my energy to it, like give my attention to it, give my heart to it, my body to it, I can actually step into it deeper and feel what that's like from the inside. I can even embody it. And this is what happens when something surfaces and our point of view shifts. A new perspective arises, and at first we're in that kind of in-between space, and then we say, well, I see this is how it really is, and then we continue to live from that. I'll give another example. If you have children, or if you are a parent, or a similar activity like having a pet, you can first start by like thinking about being a parent. There's just kind of witnessing it. Like, I know there's I read about being a parent. I've talked to people who are parents. I have kind of an idea of it. And then when you get pregnant, you start to give yourself to the idea of it. Like, okay, well, I guess I'm really on this. And then when you hold your child for the first time, God willing, you'll have this experience of like, oh my God, I'm a parent. And you never look back from that. So that's the embodying, really coming into a relationship to life that comes from that point of view. So, I want to set aside this whole term perspective taking, because you can see that this really biases this idea of transcending a perspective to say that it's a perspective and we're taking it. It's really this movement to immersing in our consciousness, surfacing for something about it, and immersing again. So I'll speak to that a little bit more, but I want to show you something now. This is a short video. This came from a class that we gave, and this is a conversation. It's like a sort of question and answer between a participant, Miriam, and Stefan Martineau. And Miriam's presenting an example of, she says, I'm working with somebody in my family who I can't reach. I don't understand this person. I want to talk to them about climate change, but they're like, nah. And then Stefan comes in and responds to her. And I want you just to invite you to listen to this, and with your presence and your heart, and feel into what's happening here in this conversation. And then we'll talk about it.
And this particular guy, when I talk to him, he gets so angry about climate change. I invited him to do this course, and he said it's worthless. He's got such a it's never going to work out attitude. I don't know why I had children. And I am giving him some of the articles, but there's this anger and frustration that underneath that is just huge sadness. And I don't know how to connect with him anymore with this. And I'm sure I would assume that you work or deal with people like that. And I mean, and it's like, I want to cry when I have these conversations with him, because I feel like I could reach so many people. But here's this member of my family that just feels like it does. He says, you're just talking. You're not doing anything else.
Well,
And
you know, I can feel him, because sometimes I'm angry and frustrated, and then I go deeper and I find the sadness, and then you know, that's the journey, is like embracing that perspective, because it's real. Like, it's so real that there's so many reasons to be angry and so many reasons to be sad, and it is so complex. This climate change is so complex. There's so many layers to it, and it's very it's very easy for people to go to a place of despair. You know, despair is actually part of the process in a way. It's like it's a step along the way, you know, and you know, and you need to go to that layer of grief for what we've co-created in order to find yourself on the other side with, you know, a deep embrace of humanity and how confusing it all is. And you know, so I say, like, you know, if you find it difficult, then I would invite you to find a place inside yourself that you feel those things too. And then from that place, then you'll be much more capable of fully embracing him in your relationship with him. The you know, the ultimate thing that I experience in my life is that there's no experiences out there that are not part of myself. You know, they're all very, very part of who I am.
Let's just talk about that a little bit. Maybe we'll just be together in that. What did you notice there?
Notice how rarely I do that.
How rarely you do
When
what?
when I'm with someone, how rarely do I really take a deep enough breath to hear the engagement from their point of view.
Hmm.
And I do it skillfully, moment to moment, when I'm working in that way. But it's not my ordinary self. Is just all about, I'm Kabir and I'm in the room with you all, and I'm here with my opinion and my point of view, and I'm gonna give or share or do whatever I'm gonna do. And it's, you know, I feel like in contrast to, as each one of these squares on the screen was speaking, I was able to just as naturally and as automatically just, okay, I'm going to go be Jessica now, and now I'm going to be Geoff. Wow, I didn't know I was like this. This is wonderful.
Thank you, Kabir. Sandy, I think you were going to say something. You're muted.
Still muted, Sandy.
I'm saying it sounds like we're being integral. Like, when I can get into that place and really see everyone's perspective, I can have empathy for them.
Yeah.
That just comes naturally from being integral.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Geoff, I was noticing, appreciating how he went down in like layers, like kept deepening his response.
Yeah.
And that was well modeled. See, Lorraine has her hand up.
Yeah, just before Lorraine comes up, Eli, I just want to mention that, yeah, I noticed that too. And I think it's a beautiful example. I mean, in a way, he was kind of moving developmentally, but also kind of moving more into himself. And you could feel, like, the very first thing he did is, you know, there's a point where she was describing this person that underneath there's a sadness, and Stefan just goes like, you know, it's like he's feeling his body and starting to feel what that feels like in himself. And and I noticed, and this is just my interpretation of things, but I noticed when he's talking about the anger and the sadness, and there's a pause, and he's like, well, and there's sometimes despair there. It's like, it's one thing to like take the perspective of another, but that movement is not always easy, especially, when there's emotion, when we're charged, when we feel polarized, and sometimes someone's in a place of despair. That's not easy to feel for any of us. And so I could also feel like that actually is actually being really present to the journey of what it took to encounter somebody. And yeah. Lorraine.
Well, it's so tempting to try to talk him out of it. But really, as you just said, he's in such despair. I think it would be easy to shift into empathizing with his despair and what it's like to carry that view, those feelings around with you day to day. And I think approaching it in that way, just doing the empathy without trying to argue with him, might be a beginning where he can feel safe in that he's being heard and he's being seen and not challenged or argued with.
Yeah. I'll take a couple more people, then we'll shift gears a little bit. Yeah, Tamar?
I think I could sympathize with both, because I could sympathize with him, how sometimes you see that everything is falling apart and you feel helpless. I mean, there is nothing you can do about it, and there is nothing you can do but feeling despaired and stuff. But she's kind of the helper person, and she cannot take it because she wants to help him. But at that point, he can't. And I know that I'm a kind of problem solver. I'm trying to do stuff. So I can be in both positions. And you're trying to do something about it. And just she's giving articles or whatever, try to see, there is something we can do or whatever. I don't know exactly. And she's so frustrated that she doesn't even want to listen to this. So I could sympathize, because this has been some kind of paradox. Yeah, sometimes I can understand that somebody is depressed, but I don't want him to be depressed. I want to help them. So you feel, you're trying to help them, but they don't want to be. It's kind of, you don't know how to behave in this point, because it's hard to accept that somebody is depressed and just be with them and accept it. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, you see the both sides of it, and that becomes a little bit more complicated. Yeah. Suzanne?
I just wanted to mention that you don't have to be integral to have empathy. I know plenty of simple people who have that capacity. Just to make that clarification, I think it's important that we don't ascribe empathy to later stages.
Good. No, thank you so much for that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's that movement. We're, in this kind of metaphor that I'm using of let me just pull this back up.
I can't get rid of the hand.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. In this movement of, kind of coming out of perspective to giving to a perspective and embodying it, what that is it's really a movement of intimacy. It's a movement of coming closer to something. And when, even just the terminology of I can take somebody's perspective, there's even a little bit of distancing in that. It's a whole journey, right? It's a whole journey from seeing someone's perspective to becoming friendly with it, to, not oppositional to it, to finding it in ourselves, to feeling it and to resonate with it, to get close to it. And that getting close happens, this doesn't have to do with the developmental level, it's like you can you can feel, you can be intimate, you can be caring, you know. You don't have to wait for anything to do that. And I'm not speaking from the research, of course, Suzanne, but I just want to co-sign what you're saying. That this is, we're not talking about that, having more complex. And maybe there's some perspectives that come earlier and some that come later, but it's kindness and empathy all the way up and down. Okay, one more and then we'll, Otto.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had an experience many years ago in the desert of Israel that was this very sort of self-melting experience, and it's kind of hard sometimes for me to remember when I felt a very sort of fixed perspective. Like for me, everything just is perspective, so I don't necessarily feel so owned by perspective, as you might say, or something. And so it almost feels strange to me to have a problem with wherever anyone is, or to feel, even if someone's frustrated, it's like, or even angry to the point of even, you know, just so distraught. It's just like, to me, that's part of the experience that they're experiencing. I'm happy to be available to maybe talk through that, but but that's a lovely place to be too. And I've sometimes been in just immense turmoil, and I personally want to taste it. I don't want to just exit that state or pain. And so there's something of like honoring the beauty of all of the magnificent states, even if they're not ones that are like positive per se, and they're all so beautiful. I don't know, something that came to mind.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's I'll play something here. In this video, there's a little bit more that Stefan said. Let me just play it real quick. That I think reflects what you're saying.
And this particular guy was,
I'll go towards the end.
Is and you know, so I say, like, you know, if you find it difficult, then I would invite you to find a place inside yourself that you feel those things too, and then from that place, then you'll be much more capable of fully embracing him in your relationship with him. You know, the ultimate thing that I experience in my life is that there's no experiences out there that are not part of myself. You know, they're all very, very part of who I am, and I can, you know, and that's the beauty of multiple perspectives, because ultimately we're one. You know, we hear that all the time, but ultimately it's only another aspect of self that experiencing the life that we're currently experiencing. Is just different eyes seeing in different bodies, experiencing something that's very, very real. And the more eyes we can borrow, the more capable we are to embrace humanity. You know, that's really the project.
I just found, you know, what he was saying kind of reflects something of what you were saying, Otto, of that kind of embrace of the whole, and also just feel always humbled by that, you know, what's by, you know, the Tao gives birth to the one, and that one gives birth to the two, because we always, in a way, want to find a perspective that makes sense to us, and we're always returning to that, even if it's a, you know, even if it's a complex, expanded state or just a momentary state, that there's always another side to that coin, and there's always something that we're missing, even in those kind of more exalted perspectives, which are beautiful. So I want to touch on a couple other things. How are you doing? Does anybody need a bio break? You okay to hang in? You don't, Tom's like, no, we don't do bio breaks in San Diego. All right. You can, that'll be your own process. You can hold it and see how that affects your perspective taking. So I just want to touch on a couple of other things, and we'll have another inquiry. Let me just show something. So this is, can you see that? Yeah, hopefully. This is the famous blind man and the elephant photograph, which I find this, you know, just so striking, you know, that this, I think the earliest version of this story that we know about, I think was from a Buddhist sutra that was dated to 500 BC. So human beings have been kind of groping around in this topic for a while. So this is, if I'm sure you're familiar with this, but this is just, you know, an ordinary picture of human beings on a given day, all seeing something from a different perspective and thinking it's one thing. And, you know, it's often meant, it's often in our kind of modern view taken to be, you know, well, they don't see that it's an elephant. You know, one person thinks there's a brush, another is that it's a pillar, you know, another something else. But of course, there's the other points of view in this image. There's the point of view of the elephant itself. There's the point of view of the painter, which is the so-called objective point of view. So we don't want to merely just take the point of view of the painter and say, we know this is an elephant. If you've ever done any painting or art, it often involves doing something like this and then saying that's not it and ripping it up and starting over again. So this is a kind of view of something I want to just bring forth, which is we've already been touching on, is that we need each other in this process, the participatory nature of perspective taking, you know, like Stefan was kind of pointing to that, some of our conversation was pointing to that in order to like make sense, we need to be in relationship with each other and talk to each other and see, what are we seeing, you know, like none of us are seeing the whole picture. Like, how can we be together to see more? And of course, the integral model has this really extraordinary map of perspectives, this taxonomy of perspective taking that's extraordinary. We won't go into that or look at that, but it just points to the vastness of ways that we can see in the worlds that arise from those perspectives. I'll just throw a couple images. These are Sean Hargens's images from Integral Methodological Pluralism, just to kind of complexify this picture a little bit for a moment, that we can each see that, you know, we can each look at this elephant from a different perspective using the same kind of approach. So when they're all touching the elephant, but they're touching different parts of it, we can use different methods. So this is, we could be the same subject using different methods. So I could be looking at the elephant and touching it. I could smell it. I could weigh it. I could taste it. I could do a genetic assessment of it. I could commune with it. I could notice my own phenomenological state as I relate to the elephant. There's lots of different ways that we can inquire. Then, of course, this is the sort of complex ontology. Maybe we're looking at an elephant, or maybe we're looking at something that's really not one thing, like climate change or racism or political polarization. We're all using that term to point to something, but we're pointing to something that's many things at once. And then this diagram, which combines it all together. So there's just like so many different ways to see and so many different things that we're looking at, and so many of us that see things in different ways. So it kind of just kind of points to the social nature of perspective taking. So I just wanted to share this quote to kind of bring this view in. This is from Karen Barad. "We are not outside observers of the world, and neither are we simply located at particular places in the world. Rather, we are part of the world and its ongoing interactivity." So what she's saying here is a couple things that are really important. One is there's something missing from this diagram. You know what's missing? Is that the arrows only go in one direction. What Karen is saying here, when she uses this term interactivity and speaks to being part of the world, is that we are subjects viewing something, but these subjects and objects don't pre-exist. We're co-creating each other. Like, I come in to put my hands on the elephant, but the first thing I do is hear the elephant's breathing, and all of a sudden I'm different. The elephant is creating me as much as I'm creating the elephant in my consciousness. So that interactivity is really important. We're part of a whole. And the other word that's really important here is ongoing. It's a process. So she's bringing kind of a feminist perspective into this, that in the integral model, we often kind of look at things in a static way. There's an elephant and there's people looking at it. But this isn't, we're constantly being moved and shifted in our perspective by each other. This is an ongoing process of interactivity. And as she said, knowing is a matter of part of the world making itself intelligible to another part. I just love these words. I wanted to share them with you. So now, if we look at this picture as a kind of ongoing process of interactivity, a dance, and imagine the movement of that. And imagine this as part of the world meeting itself through its own senses, and making sense of itself through each other. See how the picture looks differently. I'll just pause there for some reflections. So my point here is to bring in the social nature of our sense making and perspective taking and experiencing, and that we might consider that there's no place outside of the world that we're seeing it from, that we are the world being affected and changed by the world as we're changing the world through our seeing. Lynn, nice to see you.
Hi. Long time.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw another term in, but I'm going to anyway.
Come on, throw it in.
What if there is no elephant? And that's something I've just written a paper on. Enter our post-epistemic world, where deep fakes and AI have so scrambled everything that we can no longer actually trust that there is an elephant. One of the things that my research and my paper has to do with an emergent attempt to overthrow the legal system. They're called sovereign citizens. They have a completely distorted view of our history and our laws. They believe that every lawyer, every judge, every policeman is a tyrant, illegal, unconstitutional, and what people are trying to do is meet them and talk to them, but you cannot, because they are outside of reality. So one of the things that my daughter and I are trying to do is come up with some type of training to deal with this new post-epistemic world.
Thank you.
So what do you do about perspectives then?
Yeah, no, that's really good. There's a big piece of what you're talking about that I want to come back to in a moment. But just to connect it to what we're talking about now, what occurs to me is that part of what's happened in the advent of that post-epistemic world has been a breakdown in our relationships and our connection with each other. And there's many ways that we can think about why that's happening. But there's a way in which it's, that what I'm pointing to here is the social nature of our sense making. And as we get broken off from each other, that breaks down. So there's another part of what you said about this that I want to come back to when we just speak about some ethical dimension of this. But thank you for sharing that. It's a really important thing. And of course, there's a kind of, there's things to learn and to be concerned about in all these dimensions, like the deep fakes, very concerning. What is, there is no elephant? Well, that could also bring about curiosity. Maybe there is no elephant, and epistemological humility. So there's gifts and concerns and all these different things that are happening. But I wanted to really emphasize the importance of our intimacy and connection. I mean, anyone who's gone into any situation that involves multiple people, you can watch how the misunderstanding of what's going on occurs in the space of disconnection from each other, in the space of missing intimacy and understanding. So this is not just like perspective taking, like some witness watching the world. We're in this together, and we've got to really be in it together. Otto?
Yeah, just something that kind of popped into my mind. I won't speak long on it, but just to throw some concepts is like almost like everything is a mixture of improv and like from the perspective of what this woman just said, like a Turing test. Like, are you even real right now? And the only way to kind of like know that is maybe you get to where you know it or you don't, but is in the interaction, is in the relationship, is in the connection. And to some extent, it's like, I don't know, who knows if I'm in a coma somewhere and I'm dreaming all of this experience. But regardless, like I'm still having a relationship with my imagination or the reality of you. And yeah. So just kind of throwing those ideas in there.
Thank you. I want to share one last thing, and this is connected to what you're saying and what you're saying, Lynn. Oh, that's lovely seeing a puppy on your lap. So this last piece has to do with just to bring in, has to do with how we see the world matters. And there's a particular, we could spend a whole day on and how we can care for how we take perspectives. Because in a way, like what you're saying is true, and what Lynn's saying is true. What we're all saying is true in a way. And I just want to have us come into like, how do we care for the impact of the perspective that we're taking and bring that dimension in. So we're in relationship, we need each other. And how is our care for each other and our care for the world impacted by how we see the world? So I'll bring just one more thing in here about that. So this is another quote from Karen Barad. What we need is an appreciation of the intertwining of ethics, knowing, and being. Since each interaction matters, since the possibilities for what the world may become call out in the pause that precedes each breath before a moment comes into being and the world is remade again. because the becoming of the world is a deeply ethical matter. This is just, I find these words to be really profound. So she's speaking to the pause, which is this moment of surfacing. And that moment of witnessing is a kind of, you might see as a moment of creativity, moment of potential, out of which the next moment and coming into being of the world is remade again. So that our perspective taking matters. So as we, I just want to come back to this exploration we did earlier about immersion and surfacing as an example of this. So I'm going to play this again a little bit longer. Oh, wait a minute, I got to make sure I have the sound on.
You're not sharing right now.
I'm not sharing. Well, you just heard the words from Karen.
Yeah, okay.
That's all. So thanks for letting me know. There we go. Okay. All right. In case this helps, I'm going to read this again. What we need is an appreciation of the intertwining of ethics, knowing, and being, since each interaction matters, since the possibilities for what the world may become call out in the pause that precedes each breath before a moment comes into being and the world is remade again, because the becoming of the world is a deeply ethical matter. So I want to come back to this exploration we did of waking up from a perspective and just explore a little bit about perspective taking and how we do that and how we can navigate that with care.
Did you get it? Yeah. I did, I felt it. It's hard to describe.
Very, very good. Your turn. Now. Not so hard. Sorry.
So that's it. That's a good just a brief clip from an integral moment. Yeah. Maybe just reflect on something about that. So this is something you can say to almost anything that you don't like, if you want to do away with it. That's just your projection. Anybody ever said that to you in the middle of an argument? Raise your hand if somebody said that to you, or you said that to somebody, or you heard somebody say that to you in the middle of an argument. That's just your projection. So this is surfacing, right? Like that's like when we see somebody else's perspective, we can go like, oh, there's a different perspective there, like Stefan did. Let me come in relationship to it. Let me open my heart to it. Let me sit next to this person and feel what the world looks like from them. Or if we don't want to, we can say that's just your projection. Or if you want to become developmentally agile with this response, you can use one of these things. That's just your opinion or your interpretation or your projection or your experience or your construct or, whatever. You're just being the one, the two, or the three, the 10,000 things, not the eternal doubters. It's just variations on, I know you are, but what am I? Which is also another kind of transcendent move, right? Like it's kind of a one-upping. So, but this is important because once we know that we can actually take a perspective, you can see the power in that. It can cause harm, or it can do good. So coming back to that view of a parent, you know, if you came up to that person who was holding a child, utterly immersed in a love for their child, or your puppy, or something that deeply matters to you. And you came up to that person and said, well, that's your love for your child is just a construct of your consciousness. Or you come up to a child that's immersed in something, you would never say that to them if you're being kind. So on the other hand, sometimes you could say that's just your projection, and the response might be, oh my God, you're right. Oh, I've been suffering with that for so long. I see something now. So these movements in perspective taking and embodiment are not inherently good or bad, but they matter. So I just want to, let me check how we're doing on time. Good, a little bit more time. So I want to add a little bit more context to this, and then I'll give us an inquiry to go into. So these are kind of more ethical words that are associated with immersion and surfacing. So, which is the sort of dynamic of seeing something as object and becoming subject. So if we take the view of respect and responsibility for a moment. So if we take a view, and this is really relevant to some of the things we've been talking about, especially what you were saying, Lynn. We take the view that of total respect for each individual being. We might practice that by seeing that everyone has a right to their own perspective. They have a right to the world that they're living in. They're, as a sovereign being. I might be wrong, but you know, I have a right to be wrong. I have a right to see the world that I see. I might say, like, let's not presume to understand what another person's perspective is. Let's be curious. Don't attempt to change or improve somebody. They have a right to be where they are. I might say, let's not make assumptions about why this person thinks the way they do or what their intentions are. We know that a human life is an unfathomable mystery. We often don't know why we think what we think and what our intentions are. So let's hold it lightly. Anything that the person has done or said in the past, because that may not be who they are now. And don't take on a role, especially a helping role, without their permission. So those are kind of ways you might enter into like a deeply respectful stance. The other side of this is responsibility. So if I'm, you know, to use a humorous example, if I'm running around the house going, where are my glasses? I can't find my glasses anywhere, right? I've looked everywhere and I've got a call in 5 minutes and I can't see anything, right? Yeah, is that you, Suzanne? Yeah, they're, and so you wouldn't say, well, I have a right to live in the perspective that my glasses are missing. You know, you'd probably just say, like, they're on your face. So there's the other side of it, which is if we were to take the position of responsibility, each of us is enacting our own reality through these perspectives. and that has consequences. So that evokes a kind of responses. We'll start with self-responsibility to be aware of the assumptions that I make, the perspectives that I bring, because they have an impact. From the perspective of responsibility, we could say that when we surface a perspective, when we surface something that's been causing harm, and we begin to see the thinking and the perspective taking that causes harm, that's a moment of freedom to choose something different. That was so beautifully expressed in that quote from Karen, that there's a pause in the breath and a whole new world can come into being at that point. And why wouldn't we be responsible for shepherding that world into being? You know, this opens a kind of radical responsibility for ourselves. You know, that how we see the world matters. And that we can, from that perspective, be responsible for the world that we shepherd into being. So it's a polarity, right? We can approach a polarity in all the ways that we approach it. You know, we can, approach it as interdependent, as co-arising. We can see that there's unhealthy ways to enact both sides of that, as I gave an example with my eyeglasses, and so that's I think it's one of the things in the integral perspective that I think is really useful to notice, is that we practice so much attention, like exploring polarities, and that's often where the ethical situations are paradoxical. Like I like to talk about ethical dilemmas. Do you do this or do you that? But it's really a paradox, right? And so this is the paradox of, do we act, do we engage, how do we engage, how do we do it in a respectful way, how do we do it in a way that doesn't cause harm? Sometimes being responsible is disrespectful, sometimes it's the most respectful thing, sometimes being respectful is disrespectful. It's a complicated milieu, but I find that those, just from this perspective of perspective taking, those two orientations are something to really keep in mind. If you're going to help someone see a projection that they're holding, keep in mind the position of radical respect. How could you do that and be completely respectful? So I'm just going to pause here, and I want to invite us to do another little breakout. If we can do triads, just for maybe 8 minutes, we can just have a little conversation about this, how to hold responsibility for the world and how we see the world, and while being respectful in the sense that I held. Kabir, do you need to say something now, or can we go into breakout rooms?
Oh, it's so related to what you've just been speaking about. It's very brief. And just looping back to where you started us into those moments where our perspective shifts and it really changes us. So many times I've had the experience of discovering that I've misunderstood the other.
Yeah.
There's that ethic of we're co-creating the world, and what's am I really bringing an intention of positive regard, because it's been proven to be 1,000 times that I'm relating to Geoff a certain way, and that's not Geoff at all.
Right.
Just wanted to share.
Thank you. It's an ongoing process of interactivity. It's a process of continual discovery. Thank you. Well, so let's go into breakout rooms.
What's the question for this room?
Yeah, just to explore, thank you, Elliot, to explore this tension of being responsible for how you see the world and how we each see the world, and also the respect that we each have a right to the life and the perspective that we hold, how that shows up for you. And if you want to put a good edge on it, just to explore ways in which you, as Kabir has been demonstrating, ways in which you failed at that, you know, where you have missed people or missed something that needed to be surfaced and been responsible for. All right, let's go. Let's talk a little bit more. Welcome back. Let's take a couple of breaths together. Find that pause in the breath before a new world comes in. Well, we have a little bit more time together. You're welcome to step in if you'd like, say something.
So my question, Jeff, it's you know, like I love what you're doing here, and I've experienced it in other you know, places with you, for example. But my question is like bringing this kind of thing into like other organizations or committees or things where we're trying to accomplish something. It just seems like, in my experience, there's just so much drive in those kind of things, or maybe one or two individuals dominating, who, if there's that pause, they will fill it up, you know. And I just wonder about like your experience, like bringing this type of like perspective taking, or the pause, the slowing down to, you know, to try to think of like the generative thing to do rather than rushing forward into the agenda. Like, when in your experience has been able to, you know, bring this transformative change into other organizations that you've experienced?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, first, it's always the discernment, right? You know, sometimes what we need to do is barrel forward and get some stuff done. So it's not there's no like agenda here about what's needed. It's really about paying attention to what's needed. Your question reminded me of a situation I was in like years ago. I was doing some organizational work, and it was a regional hospital and executive team, and there was so much going on in this group. There was a lot of conflict and history, and there was a point where we really got into it and surfaced a lot of stuff that was underneath the surface, truth telling, and there was a point where we said, well, let's just take a break and we'll go out for a walk around the block. And everything changed when we came back from that. It was kind of like amazing, getting in your body a little bit, breathing, getting separating from other people, taking a break. I mean, it's kind of a silly answer to your question, like take a walk around the block. but let's like unpack it a little bit, right? You know, which is like to do that requires some power in the system, some authority, you know, to say that, you know, so that's always at play. There's, you know, there has to be a willingness. There's lots of different levels to this. It depends where people are. There's not a simple answer, but if there's reflection needed, so you're kind of, you know, pointing to a place where there's reflection needed, you have to find a creative way to invite that, and to, you know, and there's myriad ways of telling a story to invite people into that. But that's basically what you're telling them. Sometimes you just need to interrupt the process and invite people to take a walk around the block. It's probably a whole other conversation that we probably don't have time for, but yeah, take it a step at a time. A lot of my experience in doing this kind of work, it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall. Try things, if it doesn't work, let it go, try something different. Care for people, bring your best intentions, do your own shadow work, so that your intention to change things is not a unconscious attempt to relieve your own stress. Some thoughts, Karen?
Yes, what you just said, that doing our own, working on ourselves so that our intention to help isn't a cover for really relieving our own stress. That's the reaction I had with that film clip you showed where the woman was in distress about her relative. And she wanted to fix him. She wanted to fix him. She wanted to fix him. And my association with that was a number of times now I've helped care for dying relatives, being present near the end of life and even on the deathbed. And seeing so many people who were so uncomfortable and they projected their discomfort. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to put this other person out of their own distress.
Yeah.
And this can really come up in a very intense situation when you're tending somebody who's on their deathbed. And the hard thing to do is simply be present with them. And to do that, we need to acknowledge our own distress. And maybe be present for ourselves for a while before we can really be present without judgment and without an agenda to fix that other person. So that was what came up for me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's so beautiful what you said. I used to have a mentor who would you know, who was an extraordinary coach, and I trained with him as a coach, and one of his first principles in meeting someone else is to realize that nothing needs to change. And the thing is that we move through life with that other attitude, you know, that this all needs to change. And it's really profound. And I find actually that the more you can like embody that, the more things can easily unfold in the way they need to. I hesitated because it's a trick statement. It can't be a strategy. You actually have to really genuinely love what is. That's Byron Katie said. Ask, your hand is up. Would you like to come in?
Yes, hello. I just wanted to share that I believe it goes hand in hand when we're working on ourselves, like to not just hold back and wait till we're healed, because we're all healing and it's a process. It's a united process in which if we're out into the world helping and supporting the process, then, you know, we are still, we're I don't know, I guess it's simply just by saying we're all healing and to not just wait to do that. And as we're healing, we heal even more. Like even if we do make mistakes or, you know, it's witnessing each other and caring about each other wherever we are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
We're getting to the end of our time.
Yeah.
Before the informal chat. Did you want to respond to that one, Geoff?
Yeah, I just appreciate what you said, Cass. You know, it's like, yeah, not to imply that somehow we need to go away and you know, do our shadow work before caring from the world. It's those two are married at the hip, caring and self-learning. Yeah.
Okay.
So no, thank you, and thank you all so much for this conversation. I so appreciate it. It's been lovely to be with you, and I so appreciate your attentive and creative and your presence in the conversation. This is just an inquiry for me. Yeah, that stuff. So thank you for doing it with me.
Thank you, Geoff. We know you showed up on the duress and multiple problems. We appreciate you coming to San Diego Integral today. Where can people find out more about your work and the next cohort forming for GTC?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I point out. You can just come to pacificintegral.com and everything you need is there, including how to get in touch with us, or you can email me, or however you want to be in touch with us, you can do that. And that it describes all of our works. And there's a couple of things coming up. There's the Generating Transformative Change program, which is a 9-month kind of deep process, and that starts in October this year. And also at the same time in October, we have a new program called Embracing Wholeness and Diversity, which Cass, I think you might be interested in that based on the conversation that we had, and others might. And Suzanne's going to be part of that. It's looking at how to embrace this whole notion of diversity from a more complex and integrated perspective, and also to learn from it and to encounter what we're missing and in each other. And then that's starting also in October. That's online. So that's more accessible. And then after the beginning of the year, we have other stuff starting, including a program called Emergent Leadership. Just come, join us, connect with us.
A big thumbs up for Emergent Leadership too. I took that one.
Yeah, Eloy. Yeah, thank you.
I think Eloy put in the chat the information link.
Great.
So thank you again, Geoff, very much. So we're moving to our informal hour. But first, remember next month is Shara Mosinska, and I'm butchering her name. She has a great quote, though. The inherent divinity of our lives. I just love that. And I'm sure she's going to have a lot to say on October 14th. So please RSVP if you're coming so we know what to expect. And while you're doing it, if you feel so inclined, make a donation to San Diego Integral. So moving on, getting the question and answer. Last month, we had great discussion after the meeting. It was so much fun. So I thought I'd share a couple of my reflections. If there's really no views independent of perspective, it raises for me a certain amount of existential anxiety, because what can I be sure of? And the contradiction I feel with we're part of all of it. So on the one hand, I can feel we're part of all of it, but well aware of that minimal perspective. Then when I jump to the intimate relationship, I love what Geoff said. We're totally immersed. We begin to surface, and in the intimate relationship, we surface into the reality of who we're with. And if we survive the witnessing of the change of reality without anger and hurt and pain, maybe the relationship will survive. But what a challenge to fully incorporate immersion, surfacing, and then witnessing, so that we're not being taken by a perspective, but we're taking an operationally functional perspective to do the good, the true, and the beauty. So I know in intimacy, it's one of the hardest places to do it. The possibility of it, of injury. One other comment is, as we acquire these perspectives, I was struck by how often we relied upon green knowledge and green abilities, which makes sense. It is aspirational for us to be integral in many ways. We are still relying upon the green. So that's my take. I really loved it. The paradox between being part of all of it and the perspective view, it'll keep me up at nights. Any further thoughts?
To me, the paradox is between taking perspective, understanding somebody's perspectives and ethics. Because what if the other perspective, I can understand it, but it's I think it's unethical. And my fear in the world is the fanatics of all sorts that believe that what they believe is the right belief, and in the name of this belief, they can kill you, they can do injustice to you, they can do whatever. And no, I can understand them as much as I want, but I think it's unethical. And how do you deal with it? And we see a lot of it today. And this is my main fear, that it's not a matter of us not understanding them. They cannot understand us because they cannot understand anything that is not their belief. And I understand that, but how do we live with it? So, yeah.
One thought on that is I've contemplated things like this with people a lot recently, and there's an amazing man, Daryl Davis, I believe is his name. He's a jazz musician, and I think it was around the 80s or 90s. He lives in the South, and he's a African American man, and he decided that he was fed up with kind of the KKK that was in his area. He went and he sat with, he asked for a meeting. I think he showed himself as a reporter or something like this, and basically sat down and he just sat with this man. It was a very tense experience. He's since, basically his thinking is, look, if you think that I'm this unintelligent monkey or whatever it is that you think, then you don't know who I am. Like, your belief is mistaken. So instead of being angry with you, I'm just going to correct you. I'm going to sit with you so you can decide what I am and engage with you. Am I nervous? I am, but I want to be present fully with this moment with you. And ultimately, like, if you look him up, he has since he's gone to rallies, he has received and made friends with members of the KKK who have given him robes and all of this, and he's lived an extraordinary life in terms of how to engage with people that have maybe false conceptions or uninformed conceptions of you or others. And that's a really powerful approach. Just some thoughts.
Did it change your opinion about other Black people or just him?
I don't know ultimately their conclusion, but I know a lot of them basically gave up their belief in the systems of the KKK or the beliefs of the KKK. They turned over to him their robes, and yeah, they realized that the information that had been given to them was flawed and incomplete, basically. But he didn't like take it personally. It was like, you just have incomplete information. Something to that effect, anyway.
Jump in, Marjorie.
Yeah, in our last breakout group, we were talking about something similar to this. And my question is, how do you engage with someone who basically has been given incorrect information, been fed lies, and the intention actually is to do harm? How do you engage with them without enabling? In other words, there's a fine line, maybe a difference between wanting to help change their perspective or help them get to know me or whatever. But the fine line between that and then just enabling. In other words, you wouldn't sit down with an alcoholic and then just say, here, have a drink. Or you could actually, I suppose that is one way to approach it, but I wouldn't think that would be a very wise thing to do. So it's still a question for me, and I struggle with it sometimes in my daily life, because I am in a community where a lot of people have been fed lies through the media in terms of the politics and everything. It turns on a lot of issues, climate change, and they just have been given incorrect information. And I'm not quite sure how to approach that.
There's a kind of there's kind of a subtext to this part of the conversation. I just wanted to surface maybe that I hear, which is like and this is like, forgive me, I have a tendency to make the problems worse. So, because I find that's helpful somehow, but I'm kind of twisted. But like, to me, like it's all very contextual. Like sometimes you just have to stop the harm. Like, like if someone is hurting somebody else, you have to like intervene.
Yeah.
But there's also something in what you and Tamara you're saying is that I hear is that there's a kind of a desire to like control things that seem wrong in the world, like to change wrong beliefs, to change people who are seeing things that incorrectly, like. And what's profound for me about the perspective that Karen Barad is bringing is that she's pointing to us that we're actually part of the world. And when we're doing that, it's like kind of the liver trying to change the heartbeat, like, and we don't realize that the heart is pumping blood through us, but we're part of this larger system. And, and in Otto Scharmer's work, that to me, this opens up the kind of space of open heart, that there's something a bit heartbreaking about that, to realize there's nowhere the world doesn't have like a control panel that we can operate. And if you really like let that in, there's something a bit like humbling and heartbreaking about that. And we just need to look at the other end of the house to realize that, like, I can't change my wife's mind about things. And we're part of a system, and it's humbling, it's humbling. And but sometimes you have to intervene, you do what you can do, but there's much of this is out of our control. And to me, I do think, as many of you have spoken, like coming into deeper relationship with each other is part of it. It doesn't mean that we accept what's going on with the other person. When the pandemic hit, I had a client that I was working with who was an example of what we're speaking to here, somebody who he wasn't directly doing harm with this, but he held quite awful beliefs about the world, or disturbing beliefs about the world, like white supremacist beliefs. He was questioned the Holocaust. He was way down a rabbit hole. And then the pandemic hit, and I remember a moment when we were in the office, and I was disturbed by the pandemic, and what was making me scared was just that everything stopping, like the whole world stopping. That kind of triggered my nervous system in a big way. Like, oh, society is going to come to a halt. What does that even mean for us? And he was terrified. But he was terrified that the communist revolution was beginning and tanks were going to roll down the street anything. So we had like a completely different view that we were in, but we were both scared. And I knew enough not to challenge the view that he was in, but to really be with him and to be in relationship with him, and to over time to discover how he came to view the things that he did, which is that he kind of learned in his family to be oppositional as a way to maybe finally be accepted. But we just met in our fear. He said, I see this totally differently, but I'm scared too. And we just met there. And I found in that relationship, things shifted, but I couldn't with him in his own life and his own view of the world. But it never could have been an agenda for me. I really had to let go of my agenda to get him off his thing. That would be no way to be somebody's friend. So that's my reflection about that.
Yeah, thank you, Geoff. Thank you. Let me start by just affirming, if harm is actively being done, then you intervene. That's a given. But then I'm not a therapist. I love this group. It's very therapist heavy. I've had many friends who are, and I have learned from some of them and some of my reading to ask myself, if somebody is behaving in a very disturbing way or has ideas or beliefs that I find distressing, I ask myself, what kind of distress would I have to be in to be thinking this or behaving this way? And then, I'm an introverted intuitive, so the empathy comes natural for me. But I try to feel into what would it take to drive me to behave or believe in this way. And then on that basis, and then what I've learned from attending deathbeds, just drop an intention to change as long as they're not actively doing harm. And in which case you intervene if you can, or you go call somebody or something. But to meet them where they are. Oh my gosh, I'm kind of going sidetracked here, but I remember attending the What Now conference in Boulder 5.5 years ago. That's where I met Tom and Christine and some of the others of you. And the one presenter who, so many wonderful presentations, but Ginny Whitelaw, in a conversation very much like this one, these issues came up, and she said something that knocked my socks off. She said, you meet them where they are and you fall in love with them. And then I fell in love with Ginny Whitelaw, but that's like that. Now that's advanced. It's probably third tier or something, but just feeling into what is it taking? And this is kind of building on a previous conversation about dropping our own agenda and just being present with them. And sometimes we have to, if I'm in enough distress myself, I may need to withdraw and attend to my own distress. I have to be aware of my own limits and boundaries too. But assuming no active harm is being done, and I am in a stable enough place where I can meet this person, that's what I'm trying to learn to do. And I've had a very beautiful experience with some of my husband's relatives who are very conservative Baptist ministers who are horrified at the whole LGBTQ movement. And personally, they are wonderful, very fine human beings. They don't care what you are personally. You are a precious child of God, but by really just being with them as a family, you know, and not talking about politics, but being together with what we had together, a family bond. And what I learned was that these very intelligent, college-educated people but they're very conservative Christians. They take the Bible the Bible is the word of God. They are terrified that if the United States ratifies LGBTQ relationships, God will smite the United States like he smote Sodom and Gomorrah. That is their reality. And so we were able to meet because we had a lot of other, you know, family in common, and that gave me an insight that I would never have had otherwise. So I just kind of rambled off in a few directions there, so I'll wrap up here.
Marjorie?
Yeah, I hear all of this, and I'm still, you know, questioning myself as to how do I discern between someone actively doing harm and a belief system that passively is also doing harm, because it's not unreasonable to believe or to think that, you know, tanks marching down the street couldn't happen here. I mean, it could we're kind of very close to that. You know, we're right at the precipice right now with a presidential election next year, that it's what it seems like from the other side of the aisle, from the Republican side of the aisle, that perhaps whoever they're going to put up there for as a choice would have no problem with tanks rolling down the streets. You know, because it's basically the democracy itself is at stake, and we could easily slide into an authoritarian rule. And so, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. I don't think that's without, you know, I don't think that's unreasonable to believe in at this point. So I'm still wondering, when I'm in conversation with others who are believing falsehoods, and yes, I'm already in love with them. They're my family members. I love them dearly. So I'm already in love with them. But how do I, and yes, we generally do try to avoid the topic of politics most of the time when we're together. You know, we get along pretty well most of the time, but it's also like the big elephant in the room. And it's also, especially where, you know, my young grandchildren their minds are being formed. And, you know, how do I try to have influence in the lives of these young people? So it's complex.
I have a couple of thoughts I want to throw in. I had talked about a little bit in one of our breakout groups about how I do try to see where the love is underneath of the perspectives I disagree with, and that's helpful. It doesn't change the quality of, you know, I guess it helped maintain the quality of the relationship, but it doesn't change the quality of their perspective. And so it makes me think about what are the assumptions and the beliefs that I come in with that also make it more difficult to connect. Like, where am I making it tougher?
Wow, I'm just so inspired by what you shared a minute ago. I think it was Karen, about your conversation with Ginny Whitlaw, and falling in love with them. And I had this beautiful experience a few days ago. I was working with a new acquaintance, and we were out in the backyard doing some painting together. And I don't know, he had asked about my background, and so I thought to reciprocate, and I learned a little bit about the careers that his parents had. And then fast forward a couple hours later, and he was feeling a little tired and probably a little anxious about whether we were doing a good job. and he started joking around and saying, "Oh, we're not doing a good job. We ought to get in trouble for this. We're really bad workers." And he said that several times over the next 15 minutes. And I started to feel a little bit annoyed with him. And there was this judgmental voice that came up inside of me that was like, can we just talk about something with more depth, you know? And then I reflected that when he had told me about his parents, that I was able to sort of place his dad in like a very a blue law and order sort of job. And I thought, well, that's the heritage that his father gave him. And I was able to just, in that moment, as I reflected on that, just appreciate that he was wrestling with that, and that was coming up for him. And I felt that love and acceptance that was okay. And, you know, it wasn't me, that was him. And I was able to just breathe into it and be a witness.
Beautiful. There's this kind of statement, you probably heard it, Socrates apparently said, no one knowingly does harm. This is if you like actually sit with that, it's very challenging perspective. Because we want to judge, you know, we want to like morally judge those that are different than us, and what I take from this statement is that our actions flow out of our ignorance, you know, when we do harm, you know, even just at the most fundamental level, the ignorance that somehow changing something outside of us will make us feel better. So we act violently on the world, you know, that somehow invading Ukraine is going to make something better, you know, it's ignorance. And or whatever, it's just an example. And it's very challenging, but one of the things I notice is that when you get close to somebody, like I know we've all had this experience, when somebody's doing something, you go, why are they doing that thing they're doing? And then you actually really get inside their own experience and see the world the way they see it. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Of course they would act that way. Yeah, you know what I mean? And then the further the way they get, you go like, oh, they're messed up. And then the judgments come in. It's almost like the judgments are a measure of how close or distant you are to somebody. Like when you're really in it with them, it's hard to be judgmental. And it just strikes me, you know, like, Marjorie, I don't know how to change, you know, your family members' opinions about the world or protect those children. I know that I can feel your love for them and your care for them and your care for the world. And, you know, it's, I think the answer is like infinite, really. Like, you know, there's just I follow a Tibetan Buddhist path, and one of my teachers said, like, skillful means is infinite, which means like what you can do to make a difference in the world. There's infinitely many things you can do. You know, so it's hard to know what the answer is in a given situation, if there is one. You know, and I do find it's helpful to try to stop doing things that aren't working eventually. If you're beating your head against the wall, maybe step back and, you know, pause. But yeah, anyway.
May I respond?
Good.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between what I'm feeling, that difference between what my family members believe or their intent, because they do not intend to do harm, but they're following someone who I believe, from my perspective and my discernment about the people, the information, where they're getting the information from, is mentally unstable, psychotic, whatever the term, and the intent actually is to do harm.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think that's a true statement from, who was it, Socrates or whoever, that no one, you know, I think that can be qualified, that statement from my perspective.
It's a question. I hold it as an inquiry, as a koan.
Yes.
I don't know it's true either. I don't know if that's always true, but to me, holding that perspective reveals something that I found to be important. That's the spirit in which I offer.
So for me, it comes down also to a question of, how do we deal with the dark side of life, the shadow side of ourselves, even, of course, that is not loving, that is unloved, that does intend harm. And of course, the answer would be, from everything that I've learned, the answer would be to love that part of myself and to love that part of everyone else. But I also feel like it would have to be a tough love. It would have to be a love that would insist on consequences, natural consequences for behavior, and to ensure that, to stop the hemorrhaging, to stop, that sort of thing. So it would really be, well, it's just complex. I keep coming back to the word, it's just complicated. If there are any answers at all, they're not easy answers.
What this might be helpful, I don't know. Yeah, it's true. It's so true what you're saying.
Jessica, I saw you had your hand up and unmuted a couple times, and I haven't seen you for years, and just love to hear.
Hi. Well, it's the at the very hi everyone. So at the forefront of the culture war is the trans issue, and so I hate to personalize this whole conversation. Oh wait,
there we go.
Hello. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hate to personalize it back to my own personal experience, but a lot of what we're talking about is so relative to just the trans experience. The idea that we know who's doing harm and who's not doing harm is obviously kind of funny. Me going into a women's locker room, is that harmful? Well, you saw me during the beginning of my transition. I was scary. I would have been scary to women, and now I'm not. But at what point was it harmful to for me to go into which room? So these are very, as you say, Marjorie, this is very complex. Who's doing harm at what time, and who's protecting the children? I would have loved to have transitioned as a child, but is it a social contagion? Well, I don't think so. But it's so complex, and I think the idea of trans is at the forefront of the culture war, for a very good reason, because it's extremely complex, and it's bringing to the surface our very definition of what gender is. And and when you look at it over a course of time, you have the freedom of women, and then the freedom of Black people, and the free, all these things kind of take their turn, and it's culminated in trans people having their time in the sunlight. And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, as far as the right wing coming back and saying, hey, what the fuck are we fractioning every human experience but down to? Sorry, that was a lot. Thanks for asking.
I love, Jessica, how you brought in the complexity. I mean, we so often we try to address these things through the law, and the law is such a blunt instrument. There's so much nuance and so much about human relationships. It's what relations, and knowing each other and being nuanced.
Empathy's fine, if they're not doing damage. Because it does bring people along, and by and far, it needs to be our first modus operandi. But it's naive as hell to think there aren't wounded people out there. Eli brought it up yesterday, the Zoom bombers that masturbate on our presentations. I'm not sure empathy, or maybe one of you would like to sit with one of them, is going to calm down that gaping wound that brings them into that moment. So, and I look at our own community, some of the damage we allowed to happen because of excessive green and inclusion, rather than dropping into solid blue and red if necessary, healthy, in order to pivot on, are they doing damage? So I have a bug up my butt right now on unhealthy people in Integral, because by the time they're recognized for the damage they do, it's absurd. We're great at aspirational and upper stages of development. What we don't take heed of is the whole body of knowledge of psychopathology. These are real conditions.
Yeah.
And you can sit with a borderline and empathize for 6 months straight. They're still going to have that fractured ego that can't synthesize good and bad. It's just the way it is. Now, remember what I said, all in context. The preponderance, of course, it needs to be about green values and pushing things through, but we better have discernment for a heavy-duty shadow that isn't going to be fixed in forums like this.
Yeah, I think, Tom, it's helpful to distinguish between empathy and acceptance. I think they're not at all the same thing. And it just as an example, like you said, you could sit with a borderline person forever, as if sitting with is empathy, but that's more an expression of acceptance, right? And like just allowing. But when you said that'll never work, they'll never change by just sitting with them, because there's a kind of disorder in there that you have to really understand. That was the empathy in what I heard you say for me. Like, oh, I understand what this condition is. Just accepting and sitting with it isn't helpful in this circumstance. There needs to be discernment. So to me, empathy in a way is just coming into more refined awareness. And I think in the integral world, it's the fact that everything that was sort of unhealthy psychologically got encapsulated in shadow, and the 3-2-1 process really missed a lot about what's really going on there. And I think what you're saying is so important. And I just want to say that to me, the difference between discernment and empathy, those are two different things, and they actually mutually support each other. But it's a good distinction to be clear about, because like being empathetic isn't not kicking off the Zoom bomber, right?
That was empathy for all the rest of us to kick off the Zoom bomber. That's where we need our healthy red boundaries and enforce them.
And for them too.
Yes,
the only way that person will learn is through boundaries.
So
it's empathy for everybody. Yeah.
So I appreciate Geoff's having the courage and the wherewithal to want to broach this topic of perspectives and the potential inevitable confusions and a little bit of craziness that can come out of it. Not that craziness is a bad thing. And to Tom's point, yeah, I've gotten past making decisions about people because it's either good or bad, or even right or wrong. It's more about what's healthy. And even that's somewhat relative if you look at it from a construct aware perspective. We consider unhealthy what we don't like, healthy is what we like, simplistically put. And for example, if Democrats and Republicans are looking at each other, each thinks their side is doing good. Republicans think what Democrats are doing is not good, even harmful, even evil, and vice versa. So what is harmful is really even perspectival. It's how you look at it. An example, Jesus being put up on the cross. He allowed this. Pretty much everybody on the planet will look at that and go, well, that's harmful. That's even unconscionable. But he had the wherewithal in his consciousness to know that it wasn't an issue even of harmfulness. It was something he knew he had to do to demonstrate what he had to demonstrate and to be who he had to be. So we can get into, so the different stages at first tier, each have their own sense of what's harmful. Amber, traditional, sees green as harmful. Green sees amber as harmful. Now, teal, especially turquoise, is able to see, well, they're harmful, they're not harmful, it depends on how you look at it. That's the beauty from that perspective of understanding these distinctions. First tier is not going to get these distinctions. That's not good or bad. Is it healthy or unhealthy that they don't get it? Depends on where you're looking at it from. So is there an absolute? Is there a North Star in all of this? I might think so, but that's just my perspective, which is not right or wrong or healthy or unhealthy or good or bad. It's just my perspective is what seems functional for me being in a body every morning, how to be in this body through the day, in this mind, with these feelings and emotions. I'm constantly making choices. Like, what am I serving? Am I serving first here in something I do? Am I buddying up to somebody in red to show them that I don't hate them, I'm not angry with them? And their perception of me is, I'm buddying up with them. I'm a good guy. I'm like them. Am I doing something harmful in doing that? Am I enabling them? Which is a judgment in itself. So the realm of the relative is so hyper complex, sophisticated, confusing, convoluted, but we're always wanting to come from, to some extent, like I was talking with, I think his name is John, my first breakout, before I had to jump out of SDI this meeting, that even these things I'm saying right now, I'm wanting to be right about it. And am I really right about it? And I'm thinking, this is the highest, most evolved, most healthy perspective I can know to share. And that part of me is wanting to be right about it. So I'm not necessarily right or wrong about it. I think I'm pretty healthy about it, but that's from my perspective that it seems healthy. Somebody else in first tier, even somebody else in second tier, wouldn't necessarily see what I'm saying is healthy. So can we have compassion and love for one another in all this? To realize that no one perspective is right or wrong or even healthy. It is what it is. We're finding a way to move through it, weave through it, to wend our way through it, to make sense of it, have a sense of well-being in it, provide well-being for others. And all we can do is our sense of what the best is we can. And if we get into arguments or have differences with others, it doesn't mean they're wrong. They just see it differently. And I can justify, well, my way is more right because I'm more evolved, or I'm more this or that or the other. Well, whatever.
You're not arguing, Larry, against some perspectives are better than others.
And the only thing I would add to that, Tom, is in certain situations, and time will tell. I gotta go, everybody. It's been beautiful to hang out with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thank you, Geoff.
Yeah, take care. Good
thanks,
night,
Geoff.
everyone. Yeah, be
Thank
well.
you.
Yeah, lots of love. Bye-bye.
It's love, brother.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm calling on Jerry.
I agree with you,
Oh, go ahead.
Larry.
What, Sandy?
I agree with you that when you're top tier, you cannot look down on those people that are first tier. I mean, that's just the way it is. You have to have some perspective.
That's funny. Calling it top tier sounds like you're looking down.
I know it does, doesn't it? So we have to say later stages.
Later
Yeah.
stages, more evolved.
Yeah.
And in healthy second tier, especially turquoise, wouldn't look down. They
Right.
wouldn't make that wrong. You know, it's like third graders have their place in the third grade. Ninth graders have their place in the ninth grade. It's not like ninth grade is better than third grade. It's more advanced or more evolved or further down the road in terms of the learning process of the brain. But does that make one right and one wrong? No. Are Republicans right? Democrats are wrong? No. Vice versa? No. It's all perspective.
When something can only be down.
And I keep talking about the importance. If you're really integral, you're not stuck in Republican or Democrat. You learn to get above it and see that they both got something they're saying that has validity, utility, something. They're human beings. They're God's children, if you will, if nothing else. And everybody, I think, is pretty much trying to do the best they can.
Larry,
Even if that means spreading harm.
Are some perspectives better than others?
Define better.
They have more utility, they're more inclusive, they would lead to a greater results.
Some perspectives will consider what you just said is not better. Your version of better is not necessarily better.
I think it's better. I mean,
I'm not saying it's not better. I'm saying there are perspectives that can see your definition of better as not being an example of better.
Say what? Say it again.
I was going meta with you. So, for example, a borderline patient, you're working with them. Your perspective, you hold your perspective is better than theirs, is healthier than theirs. That doesn't mean they hold your perspective of them as better than theirs. So it's relative. Do I agree with you instead of the borderline person? Well, yeah, but that's because of my perspective and my choices and preferences at most moments.
Okay. And we all have a context we bring.
Yeah.
Best we can, and we need a context. Otherwise, we're just drifting in oblivion.
But many people are okay with drifting in oblivion. They don't need a context and they don't care about context. Better for them is not having a context.
I want to see how functional that person is.
Well, that's a presumption that functional is better. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think functional is better too, as you know that about me. Functional is really important. You know, like getting past spiritual bypassing and being able to be in a body every day and be functional. That's very important. For me, that's better. But I know there are people who forget about me as not being better.
I have very little context if you want to interview me in that way. I have very little fixed context really at all. Truly. Some people think that I kind of have Alzheimer's in the sense that I kind of show up with each moment without really knowing. Even this group, I'm tracking almost everything you're saying. I don't know the structures you're running off of when you're talking about colors and levels, but I can imagine, roughly the context of what you're saying, but I don't know for sure. And the other interesting thing is, this sort of thought process of like, well, are we looking up or down? Even that you have to have some structure of map to what do you mean? What's down? How do you know you're not upside down?
Right.
How do you know, what does that even mean? Everything is relative to some conceptual fixed point, or even the North Star. Well, what's presumptually better about the North Star than some southern guiding point or westerly guiding point or whatever? It's all
right. Like imagine some alien approaching Earth.
Yeah.
And their perspective is Australia is up here, United States is down here. To them, up is Australia, down is United States. But on America, we have configured that obviously very differently. Even the people below the equator look at the North Pole is the top. It's just constructs that we've agreed on, and it's workable to some extent.
Yeah.
I don't think perspective is bad or hierarchy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Eloy.
Bye, Eli.
It's the fluidity. Can you move in the face of other evidence or possibilities? Fluidity is the saving grace.
Fluidity.
That I hold my truths lightly, knowing I've been humbled many times.
And I personally align with that. Doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah. You personally what?
It doesn't mean I'm right simply because I align with what you're saying. Right is relative to the context of the system spouting something.
But it's the best I know at this point.
Yep. I hear you. Me too.
And I don't find exploring constant existential despair that useful.
Well, I've done a lot of that, and I have found it useful and not useful, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It's like sometimes you just have to keep going down enough wrong, in quotes, roads to realize, okay, so I don't need to try to go there anymore. That doesn't really seem to have much utility. Some of it even seems harmful to my well-being. And I had to do it because I couldn't not do it. And I had to find out what I found out and make decisions based on that and go on. This all gets clearer and more confusing in turquoise.
I reread Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
Just to get a feeling of that, green nihilism, and what a rabbit hole that was of going nowhere. And they spent a good 20 years in that. Nietzsche, Sartre, Hermann Hesse. I mean, they were all, the only thing you can be certain of is your pain. Oh, that's a nice arrival place.
I tell, whenever I get into this conversation, which is not often, anybody who's postmodern and into the whole deconstruction thing, I say, the only thing, you've deconstructed everything except deconstruction. You need to deconstruct deconstruction to realize it's a dead end. Move on.
Right. Go ahead, Sandy.
I wonder if more is expected of us. Isn't that it? Like more is expected the more you have. I mean, isn't that what the biblical adage is like, and I think that it takes us to have to step out of it and just to look at it and decide, when is it worth the argument? And it may not be worth it. It may just be, the ideal might be to love, just let me just love you people.
Yeah. Something that Suzanne Greuter has said a couple of times, and I've agreed with her, is, integral maps, theories, any maps and theories, they can really get in the way of really connecting with somebody.
Yeah.
Experience the love with that person. Yeah. Even a Hitler. I don't agree with Hitler for various reasons. I appreciate his ambition, his intention. He thought he was doing good. I believe he thought he was doing good, and he went for it. And most of the world, fortunately, in my opinion, didn't agree with him. That was a good thing. So, yeah.
There was something Geoff said about there's unfortunately, or something, I forget how he phrased it, there's not a control board where you can tweak some of these things. And there was this beautiful art installation that someone did. I saw that basically it was this huge control board they did, and it was like Every time you moved one dial, though, it's like make things more equitable for, you know, the middle class or whatever it would be. I mean, it was this huge board. The other dials would move. It would have an effect on the other dials.
Yeah.
And it just brought to the awareness, like everything is so interconnected. Sometimes we think, oh, if we just did this one thing, oh, we'd solve so much. Everything is so well interconnected, be it politically, be it sociologically, be it economically. It's so intertwined. There's no moving one thing and it just stays. Like all these other things move around, and sometimes even the thing you move, the bar you slid or the dial you turned, it would even move back the other way just because of all the effects. And it's a really fascinating you know, thought experiment, really.
Yeah, the butterfly wing effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
is all that good? Is it bad? Well, it just is.
Well, not, you know, not disagree with that at all, but I would say, and,
Go ahead and
you
disagree.
know, on top of that, but so it's not disagreeing with it, but it's saying, and also, I think like one of the reasons I so much appreciate Otto Scharmer's work is that what he has discovered or he has pioneered is that if we get this collective intelligence functioning well, that, you know, we actually can find ways in which groups of people can make decisions about like a future that wants to happen, that is like noticing or the leverage points where, you know, this set of actions satisfies a much greater, you know, or wider or deeper constituency. In other words, rather than it being you know, I'm forging ahead with my initiative, even though I'm pumping mercury down the hill, you know, to kill a whole bunch of people because they're not my people. I don't care. But you know, this collective intelligence seems to be able to bring into being, you know, more like sophisticated solutions that take more into consideration. And so you know, this argument for a perspectival madness that you're making, Larry, I mean, I think we get that, you know. I mean, Wilbur wrote a book about it, you know, so but the point, like Jeff's presentation tonight, I think points to specific ways in which we can inhabit this perspective taking more, you know, where we in our own lives inhabit more goodness, truth, and beauty.
Which I agree with. And there's a presumption in that I think I'm right.
Before we end, I wanted to know, do you guys know about the Integral Leadership Conference in Boulder in October? I was doing a private chat with Tom, and he didn't seem to know about it. It's Nomali, Jeff Salzman, Diana Musho Hamilton. I don't know what it's about. I don't know anything else, but I signed up for it with Mary because I just wanted a chance. She's going to come down here and stay at my house, and we'll go over there for a couple of days. Just so nobody knows about it, right?
I do. Integral Leadership in Action.
I think it's Integral Leadership, but I don't know if it's in action. I told you about that, Larry. I'm not sure that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah, I've gone to a few of their programs. They have like a once a month. So they're reviving integral leadership in action, and they're called ILEA Now. So ileanow.org would be a place to look for more information. And so it's kind of like some fresh blood in an old organization, which was kind of, you know, not doing as much for a while.
Which Eric and I know about historically, experientially.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we are definitely at the end of the 1 hour mark here, so I think it's about time we wrap it up for the evening.
Okay.
So thanks for everybody for the great conversations here and for being here tonight.
Yes, thank you.
We'll call it.
Yeah, thank
See you next month.
All right.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Ciao, ciao.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the Integral community.